Good evening, everybody. It's so nice to see you here. Wonderful. Everybody is so compliant. Thank you so much for paying attention. Well, good evening. My name is Amir Pasek. I am the Dean of the Indiana University Lilly Family School of Philanthropy. Welcome to the inaugural Milton J. Murray Lecture in Ethical Global Fundraising. We are fortunate to have an exceptional and inaugural speaker tonight. I first want to thank our selection committee of Anne Bergeron, Bob Carter, Marcela Rovzar, and Sergio Gonzalez for helping us select an outstanding leader to express the importance of ethical fundraising in global context with a preference for connection to Latin America. They have succeeded splendidly. I am pleased also to welcome our students, faculty, alumni, Board of Visitors members, and several of our newest doctoral students who this week started in the Professional Doctorate in Philanthropic Leadership, also known as the PhilD. Fundraising research and excellence in fundraising practice are fundamental to our mission at the Lilly Family School of Philanthropy. As I think we will hear tonight, the leadership ability to ask others to come alongside you to accomplish something new or something needed is vital to how we build our civic lives and our communities. This is why we are so grateful to the Milton Murray Fund and the people who steward it for entrusting us with this lecture. I am pleased that Kara Rachel from the fund is with us tonight. The lecture is named in memory of Milton Murray, a pioneer in the world of public relations and fundraising for the nonprofit sector. He raised millions of dollars for hospitals, colleges, and secondary schools, nationally and globally, and made exceptional contributions to the philanthropic profession. However, his story is told not so much in dollars, but in the convictions by which he lived his life. Milton's remarkable achievements are due to a collection of fundamental commitments that motivated his choices and molded his success through his remarkable career. These are the commitment to profession, the commitment to excellence, and the commitment to faith. These commitments are clearly sketched in the stories Milton told of his childhood in South America, being born in 1922 to missionary parents in Brazil, of his youthful career as a linotype operator, of his experience in the US Army in Alaska during World War II, and of his early professional days as he struggled to establish a public relations program for the largest medical school west of the Mississippi, of his years in Latin America, fundraising as a fundraising consultant sponsored by the Ford Foundation to establish a development program at the University of Guadalajara, of his decisions to turn down big paying jobs to stick with an organization he believed in, and of the fascinating and illustrative campaign to build a community hospital in Hackettstown, New Jersey. And also of his efforts to encourage increased alumni giving among a consortium of Christian colleges and secondary schools. Milton Murray founded the philanthropy program of the Seventh-day Adventist Church called Philanthropic Service for Institutions in the 70s and served as its president for 20 years. He also received the highest honor bestowed by the Association of Health Help Philanthropy, the Cy Seymour Award. He also received the National Society of Fundraising Executives Outstanding Fundraiser Award. And finally, he received the Henry A. Rosso Award from us at the Indiana University. After spending 27 years advocating for the release of a stamp commemorating philanthropy, the United States Postal Service issued giving and sharing postage in 1998 due to Milton's advocacy. And now to our distinguished speaker this evening. Edgar Sandoval, Sr. is President and CEO of World Vision US. He brings to the role a deep Christian faith commitment, innovative leadership experience, and an understanding of other cultures after living in South and Central America. Under his leadership, World Vision US has raised record-breaking donations for 3 years, impacting millions more children and families living in poverty. Born in Los Angeles and growing up in Central and South America, he returned to the US at 18, worked at minimum wage jobs while studying English as a second language, later earning a bachelor's degree in industrial engineering and sociology from Rutgers University and an MBA from the Wharton School of Business at the University of Pennsylvania. Edgar was recruited by General Electric and later by Procter & Gamble, where over a 20-year career, he made significant contributions to the corporation's growth. As P&G's Senior Vice President and General Manager of Global Feminine Care, he directed the creation and launch of the internationally acclaimed #LikeAGirl campaign. The spot quickly became a viral sensation, airing during the 2015 Super Bowl, garnering more than 90 million views, winning multiple awards, and changing the perception of the phrase forever. Before the campaign, only 19% of people thought that doing something, quote unquote, like a girl was a compliment. A year later, that had increased to 76%. Edgar came to World Vision in 2015 in response to a clear calling that he and his wife, Leiza, felt to the ministry. As Chief Operating Officer for 3 years, he directed fundraising programs that generated over $1 billion in donations and strengthened financial and organizational health. As World Vision President and CEO since October 1, 2018, Edgar has placed a strong emphasis on World Vision's Christian identity and the transformational journey of staff, donors, and beneficiaries. In 2020, he led World Vision US to raise record-breaking donations, including significant private and public funding for World Vision's COVID-19 response. This largest ever emergency response in the organization's 70-year history has impacted the lives of more than 59 million people globally, and World Vision's US domestic response reached more than 6 million people through partnerships with thousands of churches and many other local partners. He has traveled as World Vision's president to some of the world's hardest places, including the Venezuela border with Colombia, gang-controlled urban areas of Honduras, and the Bidi Bidi camp in Uganda, as well as Rohingya refugee settlements in Bangladesh. He serves on the board of the US Global Leadership Coalition, and in recent years, Edgar has been quoted in national media, spoken at events such as the Q Conference and Christian Leadership Alliance Outcomes Conference, and he appeared in the National Geographic's Activate TV series and launched The Chosen, a new initiative for child sponsorship. After we hear from Edgar, we will welcome our Professor David King to share the stage with Edgar as he leads us in conversation. Please join me in a warm welcome for Edgar Sandoval to come to the stage.
Thank you, Amar, for such kind words and that introduction, and good evening, everyone. It's truly an honor for me to be here at Indiana University Lilly School of Philanthropy, and I'm honored especially to deliver the first lecture in this wonderful series, the Milton J. Murray Ethical Global Fundraising Series. See, Milton Murray was a pioneer in a number of ways, and he inspires me and many others at World Vision, and others, I'm sure, in our philanthropic endeavors. But we also have another couple of things in common. For example, he was fluent in Spanish. Yes, he was. After living in Latin America with his missionary parents. And as you can guess, my first language is also Spanish. As Amir said, I grew up in Guatemala and Venezuela, and my wife, Leiza Marie, is from Puerto Rico, if you can roll your R's. So she and I speak our own version of Spanglish at home. But the second thing I have in common with Milton J. Murray is that he was a person of faith, and so am I. And what I most admire about him is how his Christian faith defined him and his work. He understood that fundraising is not asking people for money, but inviting people into a transformational relationship. Certainly, recipients' lives are changed, yes. But I have seen time and time again that the life of the donors are also changed. And Milton said it this way: God calls us to step out boldly in proclaiming the gospel of selflessness. Men and women await our invitation to participate in the exciting and rewarding opportunities abounding in the vineyards of philanthropy. How beautiful does that sound? That's what I've experienced at World Vision. So I could not agree more with him. And we at World Vision are privileged to partner in those vineyards with passionate and engaged supporters. Some of you are here with us tonight. And you know this, we cannot accomplish anything we do without you. And you see, today the world faces tougher challenges than ever before. More people in need of humanitarian aid than ever in the recorded history of the world. 339 million people. That's more than the entire population of the United States. So imagine every woman, man, and child in our country, in your neighborhoods, everyone you know, all dependent on help from others just to survive. Oh, but there's more. 45 million people, 45 million in 37 countries are facing starvation in the worst hunger crisis of our lifetime. And more than 100 people, the most ever, there's a trend here, record highs on every statistic. 100 million people are displaced, forced to leave the people they love and the places they know. A combination of conflict, rising costs, frequent and extreme weather events, along with the lingering effects of COVID, are fueling this unprecedented global suffering. And the crises they're interconnected and compounded by each other. I saw that myself last year when I visited the Ukraine border, where nearby conflict in one of the world's breadbaskets was disrupting farming and access to fuel, impacting the delivery of food and driving up costs. And then just a few months later, I saw the impact of that conflict in Turkana, a drought-ravaged region of northern Kenya, so remote that many families had never heard Ukraine, never heard of Ukraine. There I saw children who were severely malnourished and lactating moms who could not produce enough milk for their babies. I want to pause there for 2 seconds. Lactating moms who couldn't produce enough milk for their babies. And because of the Ukraine conflict, our partner, the World Food Program, had less food to provide for our distribution. So we were forced to give these suffering families only 65% of a normal ration. Now, that's a tough reality to see firsthand. And I'm sharing this with you because I want you to understand the context in our world. But my goal tonight is not to bring you down, but to lift you up with hope. Yes, the world faces more challenges than ever, but there is also an unprecedented opportunity through excellent philanthropy to accomplish lasting, life-changing impact at scale. I believe we can and we should seize this moment. And tonight, I'm going to share with you how we at World Vision are boldly leading out. I'm going to talk about 3 critical building blocks: casting a big vision, pursuing game-changing innovation, and harnessing the power of faith. Okay, so let's jump right in with vision. That's the starting point for any endeavor, right? What are you aiming for? I just outlined the suffering in our world today, and to respond, a small vision is insufficient. The greater the challenge, the vision needs to be bigger. And this is something that is part of our history at World Vision. My predecessors, the early leaders of World Vision, had exceptional vision. In 1950, when our founder, Bob Pierce, named the organization, we were serving only in a handful of countries in Asia. So to call it World Vision, well, that was clearly aspirational, right? But perhaps it was also prophetic. Today, we're serving in nearly 100 countries around the world. Now, vision is not just in our name, it's in our DNA. Our early leaders often rely on the concept of God room, as one former president put it. Attempt projects that are so big that they're bound to fail without God. And they lived out. They lived that out. They lived it out in the 1970s, when World Vision was the first to respond to the crisis of the refugees fleeing Vietnam by boat in the South China Sea. World Vision was the first one there, provoking others to respond. In the 1980s, when a devastating famine was ravaging Ethiopia, unknown to the world did not know this was happening, World Vision provided a plane for the BBC crew who broke the news, provoking a global generosity, right? We are the world, we are the children, remember? Yes. And then when the AIDS crisis was decimating entire generations in Africa in the early 2000s, World Vision challenged the public, especially American churches, not to turn away to help widows and orphans. Now, our vision is to end extreme poverty in our lifetime. Ending extreme poverty in our lifetime is what we aspire to do. And we're pursuing it through strategic and scalable campaigns, inviting more and more partners to dream big with us. We can't do this on our own. We started in 2010. We launched our first capital campaign to raise $500 million and reach 20 million people. You will recall that our country was just coming out of a major recession in 2010, so this was truly a leap of faith. Now, 5 years later, we exceeded our goal and reached not 20, but 25 million people. Okay, that's a good start. In the next campaign, we aimed much higher. Let's reach 60 million people. Let's raise not $500 million, but $1 billion. And we just crossed the finish line last month, hitting not only our financial goals, but also exceeding our reach goals and reaching not 60, but 70 million people. Now, the newest expression of our vision, I believe that it meets the urgency of our times. Our new aspiration is to reach 300 million people over the next 7 years. This is an audacious goal at a time when humanitarian work faces such intense headwinds of global hunger, forced migration, and costly disasters. But this is when vision is most needed. The odds are stacked against you. I want to tell you a story of something I learned. I saw it vividly back in 2018 when I think my mic has gone silent. Yeah, am I still on? Yeah, okay. So this vision thing, I saw it come to life in a very powerful way when I visited a community called Durame in Ethiopia in 2018. You see, families in Durame have been suffering for years because they didn't have access to clean, safe water. The community told me stories of pregnant women who miscarried after having to walk long distances with heavy water jugs strapped to their backs. Families watched their kids drop out of school because they needed to walk long distances to help fetch water. And the water they walked so far to get was dirty water, making them sick. In 1 year alone, 8,000 children under the age of 5 were diagnosed at the Durame Clinic with waterborne diseases. Now, even worse than all of this, it seemed to them that their problem could be fixed because many organizations, many had passed through their community over the years, and each of them promised to drill for clean water, and they all failed. The drills could not reach the water. So when World Vision came to try, the people had every reason to be skeptical. This was a community united in faith, not skepticism. They had vision that God would bring them water. And they thought that they had an important role to play. So they said to World Vision, we must pray and fast, and God will bring us water. So they fasted and they prayed for 3 days while our team drilled deep into the earth. No water. The people didn't give up. They kept fasting and praying. The drilling went on deeper and deeper. No water, more prayer, more drilling. To an extraordinary depth, we've never seen this before, of 318 meters, much deeper than expected, and that's when the water finally gushed out. I'll never forget tasting the water from that well, which the community themselves gave a name to. Not the World Vision well, but the well of prayer. And to this day, I'm so inspired by the people of Durame. They believed the water would come and their suffering would be over. Their faith motivated our team to keep drilling, to not give up. And you see, we're the world's largest non-governmental provider of clean water in the developing countries. And so we had expertise, we had water technology, we had cutting edge drilling machinery. We had all of that, but they had the vision. Now, that was Okay, one well, one country. So what about today? Today, our vision is to provide access to clean water to everyone, everywhere we work by the year 2030. That's 50 million people. And to show that we could do it and that it wasn't just a lofty dream, we put a stake in the ground by announcing that we would begin by finishing the job in the country of Rwanda, reaching more than 1 million people with lasting access to clean water. And we wanted to do this in just 5 years. You see, we wanted to confront head to head the often heard criticism that, and you might have heard some of this as well, nothing changes. Nothing changes despite all the time and money spent by organizations and governments to tackle extreme poverty. I was in New York City last year doing the UN SDG meetings, and there was a narrative of, well, we're not going to reach that goal, and we're not going to reach that other goal. Well, we are reaching our goals. We're going to finish the job. We're going to finish the water job. But that said, there's significant obstacles to overcome. Let me take you to Rwanda. So when you think of Rwanda, you might remember the horrific images on the news of the genocide of 1994. That genocide killed 1 million people. And so raising money for Rwanda, well, it wasn't really an easy thing to do. Major donor interest in bringing clean water specifically to Rwanda was nearly non-existent. But we set the vision in 2018, not knowing that within 2 years, a global pandemic would strike, causing financial uncertainty. But despite this, once our donors heard the vision, they got behind it. And with our donors, the Rwandan government, and the communities we serve, everyone came alongside. Everyone banded together. We raised more than $30 million in just 3 years. We were able to bring water access to clinics and hand washing stations just when communities needed it the most to stop the spread of the disease. And here's the kicker. Next week, I will be in Rwanda to personally celebrate achieving our goal: clean water to everyone, everywhere we work in the country. I want to say that again. Yeah, thank you. Clean water. Thank you. Clean water to everyone, everywhere we work in the country. That's a fantastic thing. What a powerful example of what a big vision can do. A country that was declared a failed state coming out of one of the most terrible genocides of our time is now on track to be the first country in sub-Saharan Africa with universal access to clean water. Amazing. I can't wait to celebrate with the people of Rwanda. Okay, so the next critical building block to meet today's global challenges is innovation. You see, during times of change and disruption, well, the status quo just won't get us the progress that is needed. We need to challenge ourselves to think and work differently, to pursue breakthrough innovation that drives impact. In my experience, the most powerful innovation flows out of your core beliefs, why your organization was created in the first place. Innovation should be an expression of your values. For World Vision, throughout our 73-year history, we have believed in the God-given dignity of children and their potential to be agents of change for their communities. That's at the heart of our child sponsorship program. This program invites donors into a one-to-one relationship with a child in need, bringing help to the child, but also to the entire community. What struck me when I first joined World Vision in 2015 as Chief Operating Officer was the stark reality that so many children were living in the world's toughest places, trapped in circumstances they just couldn't pursue their full potential. My heart was truly broken by this. And I was also troubled because the child sponsorship category as a whole had been flat for years. There was no growth in that category. But I thought the idea of mutual transformation, a relationship between people in America and children and communities in the most desperate places around the world, I think that's an evergreen concept. So we didn't want to give up on child sponsorship. I rallied my team to start thinking and praying for a breakthrough idea that would attract and mobilize more donors so that we can sponsor and help more children. We spent actually a couple of years working on this. We actually had to take a break because we were not finding something that we felt was big enough. And throughout it, we faced some criticism, right? Taking time away from other critical priorities. And I had to say no to some of the ideas that were coming my way. We were looking for a breakthrough. And innovation takes time, takes discipline. And decisive leadership is critical to create the conditions for great ideas to flourish and to enlist and protect those resources. But when it comes, the idea, and I'm gonna give you a tip that many consultants are charging thousands of dollars an hour. So get your pencil and paper here. Here's how you recognize a breakthrough idea. It's surprisingly obvious. So the next time you see or hear something that is surprisingly obvious, you are just you're just experiencing probably the seed of a big idea. So they're not easy to come by, but when you see them, they're surprisingly obvious. For decades, the model for sponsorship across charities was for the donor to pick the child that they would sponsor, right? But a surprising simple question from one of our staff members turned that on its head. She asked, so if we're about empowering children, what if we flip the script on child sponsorship and put the power to choose in the child's hands? Well, before I tell you more about it, let's watch what happened.
In the heart of downtown Chicago, hundreds gathered who wanted to sponsor a child through World Vision. But unlike so many sponsorship events before, this one was a bit unexpected. Instead of having people choose a kid from a set of photos, like sponsorship's been done for decades, we did something that we've never done before. Now, the choice is theirs. The choice to take hold of their future, to pursue their God-given gifts, to become change makers in their communities, and even the choice to step into a life-changing relationship with you.
What do you think? So with Chosen, we created a new way to connect children with sponsors. Simple but powerful, surprisingly obvious. A way that brings new meaning to choosing and being chosen, which for us has deep significance as people of faith. And for children, it's unforgettable and often life-changing to experience the power of having a choice for the very first time. And so we hope that choosing their sponsors is only the first of many choices these kids will make to shape their own futures. But let me tell you about the impact of Chosen from three dimensions. First, from an audience standpoint, the congregations, the people that are invited into this, the response rates, what we call the response rate. When we launched Chosen in 2019, the responses that we saw were 4 to 5 times higher than the traditional model, 4 to 5 times higher. So the number of children that can be sponsored multiplies exponentially. Second, I can tell you about the impact that is having on us as sponsors. In 2019, my wife Lisa and I signed up to be chosen by a child in Guatemala. And when we received the photo and the information about the child who chose us, Lisa took one look at the boy's name, Wilmer Tomas, and she began to cry. You see, Tomas was the name of her beloved father who had passed away 2 years prior. And the backstory is that when Lisa and I were living in Cincinnati, Ohio, working for Procter & Gamble for 20 years, all of our family lived in Florida. And we keep telling them, when I leave P&G, we go to Florida, promise. Well, I left P&G and we went diametrically opposite from Florida to Seattle. We couldn't get any farther away. Well, we knew that our parents were aging and that we may not be there during their last days here on earth. And sure enough, Lisa's dad passed away while she was on the plane. And she was the only one of his 3 children who was not able to be by his bedside when he passed away. And that's part of the price that sometimes you pay to follow your calling. And she was totally okay with that. But when we got a photo of Wilmer Tomas, she felt in that moment, God had taken to his home one Tomas and gave us another one in our home. And that's the personal dimension of Chosen. And I can tell you the number of stories that I've heard from sponsors about the story behind the story is amazing. And I will also add that life has been difficult for Wilmer Tomas in the past few years. In fact, his father passed away in an accident. And then they had back-to-back hurricanes into 2021 that hit his community in Guatemala. And so with the storm destroying his roof on his home. And so Lisa and I feel that we are in this boy's life, this very special boy's life for a purpose. And we're seeking to encourage him, his mom, and his abuelita, because we've gotten to know his abuelita as well, his grandma. And now the third dimension is the impact of Chosen in the communities that have experienced so much hardship, like Wilmer. And this time I want to talk to you about northern Uganda, which is still recovering from more than 20 years of a devastating war and displacement. I was there at the Biribiri camp, refugee camp. Now, when families finally returned home after living in refugee camps for nearly 2 decades, there was no real home to go back to. No houses, no animals, no crops, nothing. And so Chosen was launched in a community in northern Uganda. And you see, the women there perform a traditional dance, what they call a dance of hope, a dance they had not done for 20 years. They did it for one of the Chosen events. And one father said this: watching my child choose their sponsor was the moment I believed my country could change. That's pretty profound. And that's the kind of hope that transforms people and their communities. And it's the result of innovation, a simple but powerful switch that recognizes the dignity and value of children living in extreme poverty and gives them the power to change the trajectory of their lives. The third critical building block I'd like to talk about tonight is harnessing the power of faith to engage the whole person and tackle the root causes of poverty. At World Vision, we look at suffering in the world and we're convinced that a strictly humanitarian response is not the answer. We are laser focused on solutions that combine technically excellent programs with scripture and biblical values as catalysts to bring transformational change that lasts. You see, after all, faith and religion are important to about 85% of the world's people, especially in the poorest and most vulnerable places. So to make a real difference, we need to address the whole person. We need to consider the spiritual dimensions of poverty rooted in broken relationships with God, with self, with others, and with the rest of creation. Without taking the crucial element of faith into account, we miss a vital key to effective development. One of our most promising faith-based models is called the Biblical Empower Worldview. You see, this approach taps into people's core beliefs, such as that they were created in the image of God. And starting with this powerful truth reframes people's sense of their own value and potential and transforms their view of the world. We use a powerful curriculum to teach and to discuss and practice this view of identity and accountability that encourages care for self, care for family, for community, for people in need, for God's creation. The result is people take ownership of their situation and participate in their development, using their God-given gift and all the resources around them for the good of themselves and others. And you see, the key is this mindset shift. When people believe they have the agency and ability to lift themselves out of poverty, they can succeed where many external development experts have failed at breaking the cycle of chronic poverty. Most of the 689 million people living in extreme poverty worldwide happen to be smallholder farmers and their families. Many have lived in poverty their whole lives. Some are pushed back by unexpected shocks such as COVID-19 or weather disasters. And often they buy into the notion that they are destined to be poor. It's a lie. It's a lie passed down through generations of hardship. We have been working with 70,000 such smallholder farmers in 5 countries to equip them with the tools to thrive. And that's actually the name of the project. The acronym is THRIVE, Transforming Household Resilience in Vulnerable Environments. And I want to tell you about one of those farmers. Her name is Damaris. She's a widow living in Katito, Kenya. Once too, she believed that nothing more was in store for her after the loss of her husband and her only child, a son. But one of the World Vision staff members in Kenya, Alice Yugi, saw more in Damaris. She invited her to take the Biblical Empower Worldview training along with other community members. One of the Bible stories that Alice uses is the story of Moses, who faced seemingly impossible task of leading the Israelites to the promised land. All Moses had was a stick, but that was enough to miraculously part the sea. Well, participants like Damaris realized that they already have the tools from God to help them succeed. So Damaris started with 3 chicks she was given at the outset of the project, and she worked with Alice to raise more. 100 chicks, more chicks, hundreds of chicks. She learned to build a fish pond next, to raise goats, and keeps bees for honey. And along the way, she shared what she learned with other local farmers. And listen to this. Now, more than 500 farms have been established in Katito and beyond, new farms because of Damaris. And Damaris lives with resilience and joy. We are scaling this Thrive program from 5 to 10 countries because we believe in this model. It's part of our vision to equip 10 million people with the tools they need to lift themselves out of extreme poverty. You see, this belief in agency of those in poverty doesn't stop with us, doesn't stop with World Vision. One of our US government partners, USAID, has made an important shift recently in their agenda to ensure that by the year 2030, 50% of USAID funding will go directly to local communities driving the implementation of their development. So they're seeing what we already know. Transformation comes from empowering people to participate in their own solutions. Let me say that again. Transformation comes from empowering people to participate in their own solutions. Locally led development with an emphasis on faith is deeply aligned with World Vision values. And we're very proud to be in the top 10 USAID grantees. Now, from government funding to where we started, the transformational relationship when we partner with donors. I want to end my time with you by putting the spotlight on some of those individuals, those donors. Stu and Robin Phillips, who have been instrumental in driving the expansion of this Thrive program. The Phillips journey with World Vision epitomizes what Milton Murray said in the quote that I read earlier. The exciting and rewarding opportunities abounding in the vineyards of philanthropy. Their $10 million investment has been catalytic to other investments, a matching investment. that has resulted in double the funding for our economic empowerment programs with tremendous impact. I'll share a few of these achievements. 12,000 smallholder farmers have improved their agricultural practices. 10,000 farmers have increased their produce sale prices by accessing local and regional markets. 16,000 farmers have received training on early warning systems to help them prepare for unexpected shocks. The Phillips have visited programs in Africa many times, and whenever I meet with them, they are intensely engaged in our business plans and in our targets. You see, partnering with them truly illustrate the verse in Proverbs 27, iron sharpens iron. Stu and Robin share our vision. They're excited by the innovation leveraged in programs like Thrive. But the most important thing about them is their faith. You see, in 2012, as they tell the story, they said, God asked something significant of us. They felt God asking them to give up one of their most prized possessions, their 14,000-acre vacation ranch, in order to give more to those in need. It was a struggle for them and for their children, who expected the ranch to stay in the family. But Stu and Robin decided to be obedient to God's request, and with the eventual blessing of their children, they sold the ranch to the state of Wyoming. And by the way, the name of the ranch is Moriah, which means chosen by God. In the years since, Stu and Robin have witnessed the results of their obedience, including in the lives of smallholder farmers and their children. Stu said, God asked us to surrender something great in order to receive something greater. He wanted to remind me that there is no vista, no place, no possession more beautiful than the face of a child. That's awesome. Listen, looking at the world today with suffering on a scale we've never seen before, it's easy to feel a sense of futility, the cynical feeling that I can't make a difference. But this is exactly the time to believe in a world of impact, a time not to give up, but to double down on a vision on innovation and harnessing the power of faith, as Milton Murray advocated for. So instead of simply accepting that concerning picture, that compounding crisis such as hunger and conflict and COVID will push more people into poverty, let's push back with a bigger vision to help more people lift themselves out of extreme poverty. Instead of looking at the circumstances of children living in vulnerable places, let's focus instead on their potential and empower them to unlock it. And instead of creating more complicated plans and paradigms for development, let's start with the person, the widow, the farmer, explore what they believe, expand their worldview, and equip them with the tools for resilience, empowering them not just to survive, but to thrive. This is all possible for those who believe in a world of impact. And I hope you are inspired to join us as we seize this moment. Thank you very much.
What a powerful presentation, and I will be looking out for those simply obvious ideas that can transform things. One more round of applause for Edgar Sandoval, please. Edgar is joined on stage by David P. King, who is the Karen Lake Buttry Director of Lake Institute on Faith and Giving, as well as Associate Professor of Philanthropic Studies at Indiana University Lilly Family School of Philanthropy. As an American religious historian, his research interests broadly include exploring the practices of 20th and 21st century American and global faith communities, as well as more specifically investigating how the religious identity of faith-based nonprofits shapes their motivations, rhetoric, and practice. Most importantly, he is the author of the award-winning book, God's Internationalists, World Vision and the Age of Evangelical Humanitarianism, published by the University of Pennsylvania Press. You see why he is the ideal person to lead us in discussion with our distinguished speaker. Please welcome David King.
Well, thanks, Amir, and thanks, Edgar. I learned so much, and I know a bit about World Vision, and I see a lot of people who know the School of Philanthropy, who know World Vision well, and you shared a few facts about your own background in the speech, but I'm wondering how, at the school we work with a lot of fundraisers, and nobody ever says they want to be a fundraiser when they grow up, or very few of us do. I imagine you might not have thought that you would be working or running an organization like World Vision. Maybe you could share a bit more about your own background and how that shaped you to where you are today at World Vision.
Absolutely. Thanks, David. I used to hate to ask people for money because I didn't want anybody asking me for money. And now at World Vision, I have completely changed my perspective on asking people for money, because we're asking them, as I said, not for money. We're asking them to enter into a vision that is greater than any of us. And you experience that transformation. Listen, my background, I was born in the US. My parents are from Guatemala, Guatemalan immigrants. They moved back to Guatemala when I was 4. I spent some years in Guatemala as a kid. Then we kept moving south to South America. So I grew up in Venezuela, South America. And around the time where I was about 18 years old, my family fell on hard times. There were days where there wasn't enough food to eat, so there was what we call food insecurity. And at one point it got so bad that I just knew that I had to come back to the US, a country that I didn't know. I left when I was 4. So I packed everything I owned in my dad's Army duffel bag, which wasn't a lot. I didn't own a lot. $50 in one pocket and my American passport in the other pocket, and I came back. And so I arrived here in the US, and I didn't speak the language. I didn't know English. So I feel like I had an immigrant in my own country experience. And I did what most immigrants do: work hard, and whatever jobs nobody else wanted, that's the ones that I took. And one thing led to another. I started taking some English as a second language courses. God bless whoever thought about that idea, English as a second language. It really truly gave me the confidence that, I can do this. And then eventually transferred to a 4-year school and graduated with an engineering degree and another one in sociology. I took sociology because I was fascinated by the US. I said, wow, this is such a complex, things were so much simpler in Venezuela, at least at the time. Such a complex country, I don't understand it. So sociology gave me a good rounding, and eventually graduated from the Wharton School of Business. Joined Procter & Gamble and had a wonderful 20 years there, wonderful career. And then World Vision came calling on the, knocking on the door. And of course, when you're, in the corporate world and you're a senior vice president, when somebody makes you an offer to leave the corporate for-profit and go join a Christian nonprofit and take a 70% pay cut, of course, it's an offer you can't resist, right?
Right.
So I initially said, thanks, but no thanks, maybe. But long story short, my wife and I felt this was a calling in our lives. And I think part of it, David, is that I had experience through my hardships, although my hardships cannot compare at all with the severe hardships of the people we serve around the world. But I had experience on food insecurity, so I knew what that was like. I had a lot of dreams, and when I see the kids around the world that I spend time with, and the kids that World Vision is trying to help, they're full of potential. They have the same dreams and aspirations that I had. So I have that sense of empathy. When I look at the number of displaced people around the world, and my own immigrant experience in the US, I have empathy. I can relate to a certain degree. And so it's a wonderful thing for me to put together both my professional gifts and skills with my personal story.
Well, from your own experience and your own education, working for one of the largest companies in the country, and thinking about that marketing background, with all your education experience, what were a couple of the things that, moving across into this nonprofit, that were sort of on the ground training? What things did you have to learn over these last few years?
Wow, there's a lot to learn. The first thing I would say is that the skills you developing in corporate, that I developed in corporate, were fully transferable. I didn't know that. They were fully transferable. Skills and experiences were fully transferable. But I think what you have to learn is the culture, more the culture of the organization. Again, corporate, for-profit, Christian nonprofit, and so that was a growing experience for me. But the other thing that was fundamental, I think, in my onboarding and my delight to be joining World Vision, was that in the corporate world, yes, everybody is after similar goals and performance metrics, but it's a competition. At the end of the day, it's a competition, right? It's a ladder. You hear, climbing the corporate ladder, it's a competition. At World Vision, it's not a competition, it's a collaboration. We're all there to serve the poor and the oppressed. We have the same goals, and we're trying to figure out how to do that best.
If we're shifting to World Vision, you talked a lot about the different ways that fundraising supports World Vision's work, and World Vision's been on the front lines of kind of innovation across its history. But maybe you can share a bit more about how fundraising does shape World Vision's work in so many ways.
Yeah, I mean, I'd start by saying that we have this strong belief that fundraising is a conduit into a transformative experience for all involved. And it's a belief that we see materialize all the time. And the deeper you go with World Vision, the more you experience, even as a donor, that transformation. And then you see the transformation in the communities that we serve. We have a metric that we track with our donors. And it goes something like this. Throughout my experience with World Vision, I feel that I understand God's love for the poor and the oppressed more. So we track, true, false, and we over 90% of our donors answer affirmatively to that question. And so that's core to who we are. So that's an important element of it.
So to reiterate that, the idea of not only securing gifts for the work of World Vision, but donor transformation is the sort of metrics that you'll be able to show how those donors can understand what's happening in the world and how their gift is making a difference.
Exactly. And then, so that's at the core of what we're aspired to do with donors. And then the core of what we aspire to do in the communities where we serve is to create that impact. It's for the people that we serve to have an opportunity for fullness of life, right? And that's where the fundraising is so critical. I like to talk about our work as two sides of the same coin. On one side, you have a program that is intended to achieve certain outcomes for the people that we serve. That program has a cost, right? And so on the other side, it's a fundraising proposal. It's a fundraising proposal for a major donor or for a corporation to say, we can make this change in these communities. We need this much money. So it's two sides of the same coin. And that's the world of fundraising that I live in. I live in a world of what is the donor promise? What is the community promise that we're making? And what evidence do we have that we can actually fulfill that promise? Okay, great. Now I can go to the donors and ask for the funds to create that change.
And as we saw through the video, World Vision's always been a master storyteller, and that's really a great gift. Thinking of donors from child sponsors to major donors to corporations, I mean, how do you shape that story in different ways based on the different types of audiences and donors that you're looking to?
Yeah, I mean, it's all. This is where the Procter & Gamble training and skills experience really comes in handy. We do segmentations, and we deal with market segmentations, and we understand. Listen, at the end of the day, there's different segments and different messages resonate with different people. But at the end of the day, we are always straightforward about who we are. We're a Christian organization. That's in our identity, it's in our roots. And at the end of the day, what everyone has in common is this desire to do good, is to be a force for good. And what we're trying to do is position ourselves as we're a good investment for you. If you're interested in making a good investment and be a force for good, we'd like to consider World Vision, because here's all the things that we can do and that we have done. We have a track record. And so that's what we're trying to do.
Well, thinking about the Murray lecture, focused on global ethical fundraising.
Yeah.
Fundraising, like a lot of professions, has its own code of ethics, and often thinking of large international NGOs, there's attention to ratings and percentages of a measure of how much money goes to the work itself, or questions about how you represent the vulnerable populations with which you work. But in thinking about what kinds of ethical questions do you or does World Vision sort of at the front of some of this work, what resonates, or what questions are you thinking of in those ethical lenses in your work? I'm
reminded of one of my classes in my MBA curriculum that was all about ethics. I always wonder what is this for? What is this class for? Give me the finance course. But no, I mean, it's such a critical question in the world we live in today. I would say that it depends. So how you handle it depends on the situation, the particulars. It's all about the particulars. But we have several principles. We approach everything from a principle-based leadership, right? And at the top of the list is, as we make decisions and choices, we aspire to be blameless in the eyes of God, right? And then, as the Apostle Paul said, we're looking to also to be blameless in the eyes of men, right? So stewardship, do the right thing. So that's one principle. The second principle is we seek to always follow the letter and the spirit of the law, not just the letter, but the spirit, okay? And if those two haven't gotten us to an answer, then we start thinking about, okay, who would be most affected by this decision, and what do they think? And so with that as a frame, there's a number of ethical challenges that we face, particularly given the state of the world. I just spoke about Ethiopia and Durrami. We could have walked away after 180 meters, which is normally where you find the water. But that was a choice that crew decided, we're gonna keep drilling, okay? They could have walked away. Another choice is, you heard it in the World Food Program distribution. There wasn't enough food. So a key ethical question is, who do we help? Who do we not help with so much need? Those are tough decisions, right? And you saw in Turkana, Kenya, where we were only able to give 65% of our ration. We wish we could have done more. So those are some very practical things that we always wrestle with. One of the ones that we're in the midst of right now is we're working on telling a story that happened 5 years ago, okay? And we're looking for fidelity to what actually happened, not what we'd like to say. And so we have some recollection of it, and we're doing the best job to have integrity in that storytelling. But in one of our meetings, we said, well, we'll just go show it to the people. So the people that are coming up with the video are going to go back to Africa, and they're going to go to the community where this happened, and they're going to show them the video and say, is this what happened? Is this how it happened? And if they give us the blessing, we'll learn it. If they don't, we won't.
Wow. And knowing World Vision is a part of such a global partnership, how has World Vision sort of changed over time as it's thought about the ways in which fundraising works around the world?
As far as the entire the global federation, or
or how World Vision US works within this larger federation.
Yeah, well, see, World Vision US. So we have a federated model, and which means that there's World Vision offices in close to 45 to 50 different countries, and we serve the most vulnerable in close to 100 countries. But we actually have offices in 45 or so, 45 to 50. And it's a wonderful thing. When I was a proctor, which is a very globally structured organization, top down, all that good stuff, if I had seen the World Vision model, I would have said, what is this? This is crazy. How can you operate? Federated, and everybody has equal vote and all that. I mean, this is going to be chaotic. But back to the competition versus the collaboration, when you're all rowing in the same direction, when we're not looking, nobody's looking to get rich at World Vision, right? You take a 70% pay cut, okay? So this is not the place to come and climb any ladders. There's a different posture. There's a posture of how do we do the right thing regardless of whose idea is, regardless of who gets the credit. We have a document called the Covenant of Partnership, which is a wonderful document. You wrote about it in your book, the Covenant of Partnership, which basically says, hey, listen, let's just agree that we are trying to do the best work that we can for the poor and the oppressed in the name of our God, and let's agree to leave the decisions to as close to where the action is happening. So there's a lot of local empowerment, and I think that just unleashes agility, unleashes the ability to get more done versus the slowness of our bureaucracy. That's not to say that we don't have bureaucracy. We do. We're a big organization. But World Vision here in the US, we're close to 42% of the total fundraising for the entire World Vision Partnership. And so we do play a pretty significant role. We also have a tremendous capability in Washington, D.C. in terms of programmatic approaches, in terms of research and what works and what doesn't work. So a lot of what we do, we've been blessed with resources here in the U.S. We've been blessed with capable teams, capable leaders. And so a lot of what we do, the rest of the partnership tends to want to do it as well. So Chosen is now being done in 42 countries around the world. Yeah. So.
Well, I could keep talking on. I don't want to, because I have so many great questions or questions that I want to really engage with you on. I'll invite Molly maybe or to think about, if you have a question, maybe think about that. Raise your hand, and we hopefully can take a handful from you all who've been listening so patiently. Maybe if I can just add one question while Molly's seeing if others might have questions. But I mean, we saw pictures. You've traveled all around the world and really on the front lines. And World Vision from Ethiopia, from the South China Sea to all these places where sort of broken stories are been on the front lines. Yeah. And it is difficult to bring those stories back and tell them to donors or audiences here in the U.S. What does that process look like? How do you communicate that suffering firsthand that you've experienced to donors or to audiences here in the States?
Yeah, it's a combination of the facts and the numbers, but you've got to bring the stories, the personal stories. That we find that's the combination. What are we seeking to do? We're seeking for people we're seeking to drive awareness about what's happening. We really, in America, we do not really have a full picture of what's going on around the world. Our news media is largely focused on U.S. matters and not global and world matters. And so we have a bit of a harder job because we have to bring more awareness of what's happening around the world. But at the end of the day, the statistics matter. But what matters most are the stories of transformation. And when you hear things like Damaris and what she's been able to do, and that we can do that at scale, right? So that's what we try to do. We go around the world. I go around the world looking for, talking to people, seeing the impact of our programs, make sure that we're delivering the donor promise, and always looking to talk to the participants in our programs and hear their stories and bring their stories back. And back to your ethical question, at times there's been this debate about, do we show children in poverty? Do we show women in these conditions? And is that dignified or not? I always ask them. Can I take a photo with you? Can I share this photo? I have yet to have anyone tell me, don't share my story and don't share my photo. Please tell them what's going on. And so sometimes we come up with our own things here, and it just doesn't fit what the people actually want us to do with their stories.
That's a great point.
Yeah. There's a question back there?
Yeah, this is Anwar Khan. And actually, I'm president and founder of an Indiana-based organization, Obat Helpers. We work in Bangladesh, helping Rohingya refugees and other internally displaced people. It is really our pleasure and honor to have Edgar, you here, and your leadership and your vision. So my question is that being in a small organization like us, how we learn from the good things that you guys are doing, what are the best way that you can provide some sort of guidance and teaching for us, what is the best way to add values to the different organizations, different people, different places. So my question is that how we can learn something from you and your practices. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much for your question and for your service as well. I happen to be in Bangladesh. I happen to be in Cox's Bazar at the Rohingya settlement camp. And that was striking to see the condition of this displaced Rohingya people. And we were so blessed to be able to, to put it, remember they come into a place where there's no infrastructure. So we were blessed to be able to put water systems and sanitation systems and other things. That's a desperate situation, the Rohingya crisis. But we were there, and there were others there as well. I think the best advice that I would give you is there are interagency organizations that capture best practices, that meet on a regular basis with organizations of different sizes, of different faith, or no faith. And it's just a wonderful place where the best practices are captured and disseminated. And the one that comes to mind is called Interaction, interaction.org. They're based out of DC, and they represent, goodness, probably over 500 NGOs around the US and the world. And I'm sure they'll be happy to entertain your membership and certainly be happy to share resources, because we're not in the business of intellectual property protection. We're in the business of whatever works, how do we share it and how do we accelerate progress, which is also something very different from corporate, right? You got to keep those IP really protected. No, here, if an NGO or international organization has something that works, they tend to share it with us and vice versa. This work is there's a lot of need. So the more we share, the more we collaborate, the faster the impact.
Hi, my name is Will Austin. I'm with the Institute for Affordable Transportation here in Indianapolis, and I want to just say thank you so much for coming to Indy. I was curious about if you could elaborate more on how you provide the small farmers more access to markets.
Yeah, great question. And just so you know, that's where the multipliers happen. So we have a number of elements in the Thrive program. I talked about the Empower Worldview, and what that does is it creates this social fabric in the communities. And oh, by the way, we have third-party agencies do the research on our programs, and they tell us what's working and what's not working. So there's a lot more credibility when you have that independent research. And so the components are, we start with the Empower Worldview, and then we begin to help them get organized into savings groups. And what I want you to think about is really the concept of promoting and enabling entrepreneurship. It's really entrepreneurship. It's income generation so they can care for the family. It's not a foreign concept. It's not easy, but it's not a foreign concept, right? And so if you're going to start a business, you need access to cash. You need access to money. Well, here we go to banks. In some of the places where we work, there are no banks. So groups come together and do microloans, small loans. As they get better and more disciplined about their savings and loans program, we can inject more cash if they have bigger aspirations for their own business. In the case of the smallholder farmers, they also come together and we help them get organized in producer groups. And these producer groups now have more leverage in the distribution chain, because there's some shrewd people in some of the places where we work that will pay 10 cents on the dollar. And so they just lost all the profits. The farmers lost all the profits. But if they get together as producer groups, they have more leverage. And then last, we begin to work with retailers in the places where we work. So for instance, we have this Thrive program going on in Honduras. Honduras has some of the same retailers that we have here in the US. They have Walmart. And so we brought Walmart to the table and we asked them collaborate with these producer groups. And that starts a process of collaboration. That starts a process of, okay, well, you're producing, let's say you're producing beans. Well, beans don't have a very high margin, and everybody produces beans, so it's not a great thing to be producing. So Walmart would say, we need more sweet potatoes. Okay, well, we can produce sweet potatoes, and all of a sudden you double your margins, and you have a client that's gonna take your harvest. And so we work through the entire value chain process, but it isn't until we're able to get them to have that access to the market, that's when things start happening. That's when they get their sustainability. And then through the Empower Worldview, then all those income benefits, they start flowing down to their families, to their children. The children start going to school. Because in the absence of the mindset change, there can be a lot of money that could be misspent in alcohol and other things. Thank you.
Hi there, I'm Liz Newpel from Cincinnati, Ohio, and had I been thinking, I would have brought either some Grater's ice cream or some Skyline chili for you.
Oh, love that. The raspberry chocolate, my
Right.
favorite.
Indeed, indeed. I'm curious about the way that philanthropy works inside of World Vision. You are a global organization serving the globe, and you have, I guess I understand, 42% of your philanthropy comes from the United States. And I am curious, with so much conversation about the decolonization of philanthropy, with diversity in the field, with fundraisers, with the empowerment of the beneficiary, I'm curious, and philanthropy is so tied culturally to each country, to each region. I'm curious, and perhaps this is a larger question than the 2 or 3 minutes that we have here, but I'm curious how you approach philanthropy in a global, local, culturally sensitive manner. I mean, it's a federation, so is the fundraising, working at the local level, and I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay, well, yeah, there is a lot in that question. It's a great question, and it is in fact a topic of a very current topic that's being discussed in many different places. I'll start maybe with the one on the decolonization of aid, and I'll just be very honest and transparent. I don't fully know what that means, because at World Vision, 99% of our staff are indigenous to the places where we work. We're in a federated model, so offices have their own advisory boards that are made out of locals. It's truly a partnership. That's not the case on some other organizations that are US based and they send people. Okay, we don't send people, we work with the people that are there, and they're our partners, our brothers and sisters, and they're experts at what they do, and they know what their communities need better than we do. And so I'll give you 2 examples. One is you saw Chosen, the power to choose in the hands of the children. That was a US-based idea, but we would have never come up with that idea if it wasn't part of our DNA to think about how do we keep empowering the children, keep empowering the local community. So that runs in the DNA. The Thrive program, the Empower Worldview that I talked about, it was an African World Vision staffer who came up with that program. And so we just look for what works and they tell us what works. Then we see the evidence of the impact, and then we raise the money to feed the program that the field is coming up with. So I don't know if I'm answering your question, but that's how it works. We look at our staff in the field know their communities. They are from those communities. They know what's needed. They know what works. We co-design programs largely with their input, and many of the programs that we implement, they design them themselves. And once we're both convinced that it works, we raise the money. And frankly, many times we bring them. They're our best fundraisers. We bring them with us to our conferences and to our meetings with major donors. Said, don't hear from me, hear from our staff members in the field. So I hope that gets a little bit to your question.
And there are many what used to be, I'm thinking of South Korea, when World Vision started, now South Korea is a donor office that raises a lot of support for global work around the world.
That's exactly right. Yeah, South Korea is where World Vision got started with the time of the war. And they were 100% receiving funds from the US and from other places. Now they are giving funds to Africa and to Latin America.
We're going to take a question from online.
Yeah.
John from online would like to ask, what metrics do you deem most useful for World Vision's organizational and financial health?
Tony, can you repeat that? What metrics do you use for the organizational and...
John asked, what metrics do you deem most useful for World Vision's organizational and financial health?
Yeah, great question. At Procter & Gamble for 20 years, there were 2 sets of metrics that we followed every year, and they were financial health and organizational health. So that question, is one I love. Listen, from a financial standpoint, there's different metrics that don't fully give you the whole picture, right? And so you need a number of different metrics. One that gets a lot of attention, but is an incomplete metric, and we look at it, is overhead. Overhead rate is an important metric. Charity Navigator looks at it, and if you don't have a good one, you won't get the 4 stars. We have 4 stars, by the way. Okay, so I look at it, but it's a glass half full metric, because it doesn't tell you anything about impact, right? So you can have a 5% overhead rate and no impact, and you can have your star. Okay, so it has to be a balanced set of metrics. Overhead is important, and our overhead is the lowest it's been in probably in a long time. It's at around 11%. So that's important. That says to donors and to constituents that we are good stewards, that we're efficient, that we're trying to manage funds well. But ultimately, the question that I'd like to get asked is, what impact are you having with the money that you raise? So overhead is a good metric. It's a one metric of financial health. We obviously look at revenue raised, and then the nonprofit version of profit is what we call yield to the ministry. So how much of what you're raising actually is going into programs. And so you take the overhead out, for us it's 89%, which is pretty good. So those will be 3 of the top that we look at. They're not the only ones, but 3 of the top. On the organizational front, I think it's critical to measure the culture, the state of the culture in the organization, employee engagement, staff engagement. And so we run at World Vision, we run a survey every year. It's an anonymous survey, and staff tell us what we're doing good, what they like, what they don't like. And so you have to keep your pulse on staff sentiment. And I'm just very proud to say that our organizational health has continued to get better and better and better and stronger over the last 7 years. And every year for the last 5 years, we hit new record highs in terms of employee engagement. One of the things that we measure is staff care. How cared for do staff feel? And that metric is I think it's a 93% favorability. So those will be some of the elements. We look at staff care, staff engagement. We look at organizational leadership and organizational effectiveness and agility. So we look at all of them, and they tell us different things. But the important point is that you got to keep track of the culture and make sure that you have a healthy culture.
So we're going to take our last audience question.
I'm Pius Mallier. I'm a third-year PhD student from the School of Social Work, and my research interests are also in spirituality. So I was really want to appreciate for bringing this beautiful idea of incorporating this faith dimension in fundraising. So my question is, what would be your mantra that you would propose to us when you do a fundraiser, like really want to raise fund for various needs? What would be one of the mantras that you would propose when you reach out to people who belong to different spiritual realms, people from different religiosities and spiritual traditions? And what would be one of the intra-faith mantra that you would propose?
It's a great question, and World Vision does a lot of interfaith work in many of the communities where we work. We work in a number of countries with very diverse faith backgrounds. I've never had that question asked before, but what comes to mind, and thank you for the question, what comes to mind is when I travel around the world, whether it's in Ethiopia or India or Bangladesh, one of the things that I see is when the different faith communities come together in the best interest of the children in their community, everything changes. Everything changes. I was in Ethiopia in an area that was there were a Muslim community and then also diverse Christian community, Orthodox Christians, Pentecostal Christians, and whatnot. And they hosted a lunch for us. So I went, and And I was on the table, and I had the imam in front of me, and we had a wonderful chat. And he said to me, Mr. President, before World Vision came here, we were like this, looking around, okay? And now we're like this. And he said, thank you, because the children get the benefit. And it was really interesting because the imam said a prayer, the Pentecostal said a prayer, somebody else prayed something else. And it was clear to me that what they had in mind was the wellness of the children. So my mantra would be, let's do what's right for the kids, first and foremost, and put everything else aside. In terms of fundraising, I would say, what change do you want to see happen? And then look for an organization that can accomplish that change. Our vision is to end extreme poverty in our lifetime everywhere we work. And we believe that with God's help and with our donor partners, we can accomplish that. So that will be my mantra. Focus on the children, and let's make sure that we help them lift themselves out of extreme poverty. No child should live in extreme poverty.
Well, Edgar, as the inaugural Milton J. Murray Ethical Global Fundraising Lecturer, are there any, those were great words, any final message or word of encouragement you'd like to leave us tonight on this topic?
I would just say thank you for thinking about this type of series, and for your mission on education. Education, we didn't talk about education, but education changes everything. So thank you for putting philanthropy as a core subject in your academic programs.
You'll never find a bigger supporter of education and philanthropy than here at Indiana University School of Philanthropy. Please help me thank Edgar for what a wonderful thing. And thank you so much for coming, for your support of World Vision, for the School of Philanthropy, and I hope that you might find ways to connect with each other as we conclude our lecture this evening. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, David. Yeah, it was fun.
That's good.